There are stories that begin with fireworks, and others that start in silence. This one begins on a forgotten sidewalk, by an abandoned train station, with a glance from a pair of eyes that refuse to stop hoping. Welcome to Vale Marks, where every story is more than just a tale, it's a mirror to the soul. What you're about to watch is not just about a dog. It's about love lost, found, and transformed. Watch until the very end, because the lesson it carries is one we all need. And if this touches your heart, subscribe and leave a comment. Your support helps us create stories that matter. It was a cold autumn afternoon, the kind that whispered of endings. The wind was sharp but quiet, stirring the leaves in dry spirals along the cracked sidewalks. Laura pulled her jacket closer around her as she stepped off the bus near the edge of town. Her shift at the Animal Assistance Center had ended a little late, and she decided to take the longer route home, a walk that passed by the old train station. The station had been closed for years now. Ever since the pandemic reshaped everything, the place had become a relic, half forgotten, overgrown, and silenced by time. Some said people used to sleep there, travelers with no destination, the lost and the drifting, but lately, it had just been empty, or so she thought. As she passed the edge of the chain-link fence, Laura's eyes caught on something strange near the base of the old platform. It was barely noticeable, a faded, frayed blanket, crumpled near the rusted tracks. At first, she thought it was just trash. Then the blanket shifted. She stopped. Her breath caught as she stepped a little closer. One cautious foot after another, the wind pushed at her back, urging her forward, though her gut pulled her in two directions at once, curiosity and dread. That kind of dread that doesn't come from fear, but from sensing something forgotten, something fragile. What she saw beneath that blanket made her stop completely. There, tucked into the folds, like he was trying to disappear into them, was a small Pitbull puppy, no older than maybe 4 months. His fur was dirty, tangled with leaves and dust, and clung to his thin frame. He trembled slightly, not from the cold alone, but from the effort of holding still, as if even breathing too loudly might make the world notice him again. His paws were curled tightly beneath him, his belly pressed to the concrete, and between his jaws, gripped gently but firmly, was a child's glove. It was blue, tiny. The kind of glove a kid might wear to preschool on chilly mornings. Laura didn't move. She didn't speak. Her eyes met his. And in that moment, something passed between them, not recognition, not fear, something deeper. He looked at her with a stillness that broke her. His eyes weren't wild or angry or even particularly alert. They were tired. Not the kind of tired that came from lack of sleep, but the kind that came from waiting too long for someone who never showed up. There were no other people nearby. The street behind her was empty, save for the occasional car slowing at the red light down the road. The station around them was silent, save for the soft whisper of dry leaves brushing against concrete. But there was something heavy about the air, like this place had once held echoes of voices, of goodbyes, of promises made and broken. Now, all that remained was this tiny heartbeat wrapped in wool and dirt, clutching someone else's memory in his teeth. Laura took a slow step forward. The puppy didn't flinch. He didn't retreat. But he didn't move either, just stared. She knelt, carefully, keeping her body low, her palms visible. She whispered a soft, "Hey, there," though she wasn't even sure why. Maybe to remind herself this was real. Maybe to prove to the air that she wasn't a threat. Maybe just because silence felt too loud in the moment. The pup's ears twitched, but he didn't drop the glove, didn't loosen his grip. He just blinked once, slow and deliberate, the way dogs do when they're watching, assessing, deciding. Laura felt a tightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't new to rescue. She'd volunteered with shelters, worked intake, done the hard parts, the injuries, the fear, the cages. But this wasn't rescue. This was something else. This was witnessing. She lowered herself all the way to the cold pavement, the rough concrete pressing into her knees. She didn't reach out, didn't push. She just sat and waited. The wind blew past them in little bursts. A dry leaf skittered between her shoes. Still, she didn't move. He was so small, so quiet. She wondered how long he'd been there. Hours? A day? Longer? She looked around again. No leash. No crate. No food bowl. No footprints leading away. Just the blanket, the glove, and this ghost of a dog waiting for someone who would never come back, and yet he hadn't left. Why? The question lingered. She could have left, could have told herself someone else would stop, that maybe he belonged to someone nearby, but something in those eyes wouldn't let her. They weren't begging. They were asking, not for food, not for help, but for confirmation. Are you it? They asked. Are you the one? Or should I keep waiting? Laura swallowed hard. This wasn't part of her plan. She had groceries to pick up, dinner to figure out. A dozen excuses lined up like soldiers in her mind. But none of them mattered anymore. She shifted gently, reaching into her coat pocket for a protein bar. She peeled it open slowly, broke off a piece, and placed it on the concrete a few feet away. Then she sat back again, waiting, watching, and after a long, still minute, the puppy moved. Not much, just a slight lift of the nose, a twitch, a pause. Then he stretched his neck, sniffed the air, and slowly extended a paw forward. One step, then another, still clutching the glove. And in that moment, Laura knew this wasn't a chance meeting. This was the start of something neither of them expected, and both of them needed. Laura didn't sleep that night. She made it home, mechanically going through the motions keys on the hook, boots by the door, the soft hum of the heater kicking in, but her body was on autopilot. Her mind, though, stayed behind, back at that forgotten train station, back with the Pitbull puppy curled beneath the torn blanket, eyes like faded copper, clutching that tiny blue glove as if it was the last tether he had to the world. She sat at her kitchen table with the lights off, a cold cup of tea untouched in front of her, the night outside pressed against the windows, thick and silent. But inside her chest, a storm was building. It wasn't new. It was old grief familiar, quiet, always sitting just beneath the surface, the kind she'd learned to live beside, but never through. Danny. She whispered his name into the stillness, and it felt like an echo. Her son? Her boy. It had been 5 years, 5 birthdays missed, 5 Christmas mornings with an empty stocking, hung by habit, 5 years since the accident, since the night. The train never slowed down, and her little boy never came home. He had been 12, smart, sensitive, always asking questions. He loved drawing comic books, eating cereal at midnight, and leaving notes on the fridge that said things like, "You're the best mom in the galaxy." She hadn't been near a train station since, not once. Until today. Laura stood up suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. She couldn't sit in that silence anymore. She moved on instinct, grabbed a few slices of turkey from the fridge, the wool blanket she kept for emergencies, and her car keys. She didn't even put on proper shoes. The gravel would sting, but she didn't care. By the time she reached the old station again, the moon had slipped behind a bank of clouds, casting everything in muted silver and shadow. The wind had died down, and the air was still, almost too still. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel like time itself was holding its breath. She parked a little closer this time, stepping softly toward the same spot by the platform. He was still there, not asleep, not gone, just there, like he had never even considered leaving. Laura crouched a few feet away, the blanket folded over one arm, the turkey in a sandwich bag tucked into her jacket pocket. She said nothing. The dog didn't move. They just looked at each other. Something about the way he lay there, it wasn't just waiting. It was deeper than that. He was anchored to that space, like it held something sacred. And maybe it did. Maybe someone had once promised they'd return. Maybe someone had said, "Wait here, I'll be right back." And maybe he'd believed them. Laura's eyes stung. She blinked hard and sat down slowly, crossing her legs on the cold pavement. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't warm, but it was right. Minutes passed. The world kept spinning elsewhere, but for a little while here, nothing moved. She thought about how loss doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it comes with silence. A seat left empty, a toy untouched, a blanket folded just so, or a small dog, clinging to a glove with the kind of stillness that only those who have lost something truly precious understand. Laura hadn't cried in a long time. She'd told herself she was past, that she'd done her grieving, that tears didn't fix what couldn't be undone. But now, with this little creature staring at her through eyes far too wise for his age, she felt it rising in her throat. The first tear surprised her. The second didn't. She took the turkey out, slowly, and placed a small piece on the ground between them. The puppy didn't lunge for it. He just sniffed once, then carefully leaned forward and took it gently, like it might vanish if he rushed. Laura reached behind her and unfurled the blanket, laying it out flat beside him, not touching, not invading, just an offer. He watched, she said softly. I lost someone too. The puppy tilted his head. I used to think it was the end, she continued, voice cracking, that nothing would ever feel full again, that no matter what I did, the space he left would always echo. She took a breath, blinking away the blur in her vision. But maybe it was never about filling it. Maybe it's just about not letting the echo scare me. The wind stirred, gentle this time, carrying the smell of night and old metal. Then something shifted. The dog moved. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even confident. Just one paw on the edge of the new blanket. Then another, still clutching the glove, still wary but closer. And then, with a slow, cautious motion, he set the glove down. Laura froze. That glove, it wasn't just fabric. It was memory. It was promise. It was the last remnant of someone who had mattered to him, and now he was letting it go, not abandoning it, not forgetting it, just placing it between them. Laura reached out, slowly, letting her fingers brush the edge of the glove, then the edge of his paw. He didn't pull away. Her heart felt like it might shatter. Okay, she whispered. Let's go home. When she stood, he followed. No leash, no coaxing, just trust. She opened the door of her old pickup, lifted him gently into the passenger seat, laid the blanket down beneath him. He turned once, curled into a ball, and rested his head on the glove. As she slid into the driver's seat, Laura looked over at him. Something inside her shifted. A piece of herself she thought was locked away began to thaw. She hadn't just saved him. He hadn't just let her. They'd met at the exact edge of their pain, and somehow that had been enough. Enough to try, enough to go forward. Not to forget, but to carry the memory together. One glove, two broken hearts, and a truck headed towards something neither of them had dared hope for. A second chance. The house was quiet that night. Not the kind of silence that came from peace, but the kind that hummed with newness, soft, careful, uncertain. Miles lay curled on the old fleece blanket Laura had spread out in the corner of the living room, his back pressed against the wall, his head resting gently on the little blue glove. He hadn't made a sound since they arrived. No whining, no barking, not even the soft sigh of a settling pup, just quiet breathing and eyes that stayed half open, like he couldn't quite let go, like sleep was still something too dangerous to trust. Laura sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, a mug of chamomile tea going cold in her hands. She watched him, unsure what to do next. Part of her wanted to walk over, to kneel beside him, to offer touch and comfort and warmth. But she knew better. This wasn't about what she wanted. This was about what he needed. And what he needed now was space and presence. At the same time, she whispered, more to herself than to him, you've been through a lot, haven't you? He didn't move, didn't blink. Laura leaned back and stared at the ceiling, letting her thoughts drift. After a while, she said softly, Miles, that's what I'll call you. It wasn't a planned name. It came to her like a whisper from someplace deeper. Miles. because that's what he had traveled. Not just in footsteps, but in time, in heartache, in silent waiting. Miles wasn't just a name, it was a testament to survival. She repeated it again, just to test how it felt in the air. Miles, his ear flicked, a small thing, but enough. Over the next few days, they settled into something that resembled a rhythm, not a routine implied predictability. This was more like a mutual agreement to coexist gently. Miles didn't eat like most dogs. He approached the food bowl cautiously, sniffed every inch, then took small, slow bites like he expected someone to take it away. He drank water in short sips, always glancing around before each one, his body tense even when still. At night, he chose to sleep near the door, never far from the exit. Laura would find him there each morning, his body curled tightly, gloves still nestled under his chin. It was his anchor, the last piece of whatever world he'd come from, and he guarded it with a tenderness that broke her heart. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night and peek over the edge of the couch. He'd be watching her, not with fear, just watching, like he was still trying to understand if she was real, if this place was real, if any of this was truly his to keep. Laura didn't rush him. She didn't speak loudly or approach him suddenly. Instead, she filled the silence with gentle stories, reading aloud old letters and cards she had kept from Danny, birthday notes, drawings, the kind of little things mothers never throw away. "I used to read to my son," she said one night, her voice barely louder than the ticking clock. "He liked stories about time travel, said he wanted to go back and meet dinosaurs, or jump ahead and see if flying cars ever became real." She smiled at the memory, her chest tightening around it. "Maybe that's what you've done, huh? Traveled miles to end up here." Miles didn't respond, but she swore she saw his tail twitch. One morning, she found him by the window, standing, not sitting for the first time. He was staring out, ears slightly forward, nose twitching at the scent of the world beyond, not scratching to go out, not whining, just watching. She joined him, sitting on the floor a few feet behind. "You still looking for someone?" she asked. He didn't turn around, but the question hung in the air, unanswered. That day, she took him out for the first time, no leash, yet just carried him to the backyard and set him down on the patchy grass. He sniffed around, carefully, avoiding every loud sound, every sudden movement of leaves. But he stayed. He didn't run. That alone felt like a miracle. Back inside, Laura wrote in her journal, something she hadn't done in years. "He stayed. I didn't think it would mean so much, but it does. I think I'm afraid of waking up and finding him gone, but maybe he's just as afraid of waking up and finding me gone too." Over the following weeks, Miles began to shift gently, slowly. He started following her from room to room, always a few steps behind, always quiet. If she paused to fold laundry, he sat nearby. If she made tea, he lay near the stove. He never begged, never demanded. He simply was present, watching. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close, something rarer, trust. And that, she realized, was even more sacred. She began saying his name more often. "Miles, I'm going to the store. Miles, want to come sit by the window. Miles, I think today's a good day to just breathe." Each time his ears perked up, just a little, but enough. And every night, she still found him by the door, curled up with the glove, but now there was something different about the way he lay there. Less tight, less braced, like his body was beginning to believe what his heart was still unsure of. That maybe, just maybe, this was home. Laura often sat on the edge of the couch in the early hours, tea in hand, watching the way moonlight touched his fur. She whispered once, barely audible, "I used to think my heart was dead." She glanced toward him. He was watching her again. But maybe it wasn't dead. Maybe it was just asleep for a very, very long time. And Miles, his eyes half closed, head resting on the soft blue glove, let out the gentlest sigh, as if to say, "Me too. It started like any other chore, mundane, simple, necessary. Laura had decided to wash the old fleece blanket, the one Miles had first curled up in, the one that still carried faint traces of the dust and cold from the night she brought him home. It had sat folded in the laundry basket for weeks, tucked away behind more pressing things, emails to answer, groceries to restock, the daily rhythm of healing that never quite slowed down. But that morning felt different. Miles was dozing by the window, head resting against the floor, not quite asleep but calm. His blue glove was still near, always near, but now lay beside him instead of beneath him. Like even that small shift meant something. Laura took it as a sign. Maybe it was time to let go of some weight, even if only by washing a blanket. She tossed it in the machine, gently, hesitating a second before adding detergent. It wasn't just a blanket. It was a symbol, the first thing that had wrapped around him after the streets, after the silence, after the waiting. But it was also dirty. And love, she reminded herself, meant care even in the smallest acts. As she shook it out, a soft flutter of something caught her eye, barely there, but enough. A folded piece of paper slipped from the inner seam. It was tucked deep inside, as though intentionally hidden, wedged between layers of fabric where time had creased it perfectly. Laura's breath caught as she bent down to pick it up. It wasn't much a worn, creased scrap of notebook paper, the kind torn from a spiral-bound pad, soft at the edges, smudged with time. She unfolded it carefully, her fingers trembling. It was a drawing, pencil on paper. The lines were faint, but full of life. A child's hand. That much was obvious. In the center stood a boy stick-figure body, messy hair, a bright smile drawn with strong lines. Beside him was a dog, unmistakably a Pitbull, with one ear slightly flopped to the side, a detail so precise, Laura had to blink. Miles had one ear that bent just like that, forever tilted, as if holding a secret. The boy and the dog were standing side by side, both with wide cartoon smiles, holding what looked like a pair of gloves, identical, small, and drawn with care. Beneath the drawing, in uneven, shaky handwriting, were the words, "If we ever get lost, just hold this, and we'll find each other again." Laura sat down on the laundry room floor, the drawing still in her hands, her heart suddenly unsteady. She read the sentence again, and again, "If we ever get lost." The glove. He hadn't just found it. He hadn't just clung to it out of survival. It meant something. It was a piece of someone he had once belonged to, someone who had loved him enough to draw this picture and write those words, someone who had promised, maybe through tears, maybe with a smile, that no matter what happened, they'd find their way back to each other. Laura's eyes welled up, and she didn't stop it. She let the tears fall, quiet and slow. All this time, she had assumed Miles had been abandoned, left behind, forgotten. But what if that wasn't the story? What if he hadn't been given up but lost? What if he had been waiting not out of habit, but out of hope? The difference was small, but it changed everything. She looked down at the drawing again, the crooked smile on the boy's face, the shape of the ears, the way the gloves were held like treasures. It was all so intimate, so deliberate. This wasn't just a doodle. It was a memory. It was love on paper. Laura stood slowly and walked back to the living room. Miles stirred at the sound, lifting his head. His eyes met hers, and something in them looked familiar again, like the boy in the drawing had looked through him. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he didn't. But Laura did. She knelt beside him and held out the drawing. "Is this you?" she whispered. "Is this your person?" Miles leaned forward, slowly, his nose brushing the paper. He sniffed once, twice, then rested his head against her hand. No bark. No cry. Just presence. Laura sat there for a long time, the paper still in her hand, her other hand resting gently on his back, and in the quiet, questions began to form, soft and heavy. Who was the boy? Where had he gone? Was he still out there, maybe a few towns away, still drawing pictures, still carrying the other glove? Was he alive? Was he looking? Or had life, in one cruel and ordinary moment, taken him away without warning, leaving Miles clinging to the only piece left. Laura didn't have the answers, but for the first time, she realized something she hadn't before. Miles hadn't just needed a home, he'd needed to be found. And maybe she hadn't just saved a dog, maybe she'd stepped into a story still unfolding. She folded the drawing again, gently this time, like tucking a secret into her chest. She would keep it safe, not because it belonged to her, but because someone had once trusted the world enough to believe in finding each other again. And sometimes, that kind of hope deserves to be carried forward. The knock on the door came mid-morning, just as Laura was finishing up her second cup of coffee. She wasn't expecting anyone, but when she peeked through the side window, a familiar face smiled back. "Gwen," she murmured, already reaching for the door. Gwen Langley had been Laura's closest friend since their college days. Where Laura had chosen to work with animals, Gwen had dedicated her life to working with people specifically, children and teens who had been through more pain than most adults could fathom. As a trauma therapist and grief counselor, Gwen carried stories no one else could. She also carried light quietly, gently like a lantern in a hallway of closed doors. Laura hadn't seen her in a few weeks, maybe longer. Life had been moving in slow motion since Miles arrived. The moment Gwen stepped inside, her eyes went straight to the floor near the window where Miles lay, head resting over his front paws, half asleep, but still alert. He didn't jump up or bark. He didn't cower either. He simply watched. Gwen paused. Then, without looking at Laura, she whispered, "That's not just any dog." Laura raised an eyebrow. "You sound like you've seen a ghost." "I've seen a lot of pain," Gwen said, crouching carefully to Miles's level, her voice as calm as ever. "But I've also seen what happens when someone brings peace into a room just by being still." Miles didn't move, but his ears shifted slightly. He was listening. Gwen extended her hand slowly, palm open, low to the ground. She didn't speak again, didn't call to him, didn't demand a thing, just waited. After a long moment, Miles rose to his feet, not abruptly, not nervously, just rose, then walked toward her, his steps steady but soft, like he already knew what to do. He placed his nose against Gwen's hand and left it there. Laura stood in the kitchen doorway, unsure what she was witnessing, but knowing something inside her was changing. Gwen looked up, her eyes glassy. "Laura, this dog is special, I know," Laura whispered, though part of her hadn't fully put it into words until now. "No," Gwen continued, "I mean, really special. He has presence, stillness. Most dogs bark, wiggle, search for attention. But this one he watches. He reads a room before he steps into it. He waits to be needed." Laura came closer, crouching beside them. "You think it's trauma?" Gwen shook her head. "It's something more than that. It's what comes after. He's not reacting to pain. He's holding it. Not in a way that makes him afraid, but in a way that says, 'I've been there too.'" Laura exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly on Miles's back. His fur was warmer today, softer somehow, or maybe she was just noticing it for the first time. "I've been thinking," Gwen said gently, "about therapy dogs, about kids in my care who can't talk, who won't make eye contact, who've lost more than they've ever been given." Laura looked up. What if Miles could help them? The suggestion floated between them, fragile and powerful all at once. "You mean train him?" "There are programs," Gwen nodded. "Some local, some national. He wouldn't have to be flashy, just present, just himself." Laura hesitated, not because she doubted Miles, but because the idea scared her in a way she couldn't quite explain. "He's been through so much," she said. "I don't want to push him. I don't want to take something from him just to give it to someone else." Gwen looked at her softly. "That's the beauty of it. You wouldn't be taking anything. You'd be recognizing what's already there. Miles doesn't have to learn how to love, Laura. He just needs to learn that it matters when he gives it." Laura didn't answer right away. Her mind was spinning, her heart unsure. She had spent weeks protecting him, creating space for his healing, never asking for more than he could give. But had she been holding him back? Or just holding on? That evening, after Gwen left, Laura found herself watching Miles more closely. She watched the way he tilted his head, when the neighbor's child cried outside, the way he sat beside the front door without expectation, the way he always positioned himself just far enough to give her space, but close enough to catch her if she broke. She thought about all the children Gwen worked with, kids who had no words for their pain, kids whose wounds ran too deep for language. And suddenly, the idea didn't feel so far-fetched. Maybe Miles had already found his calling. Maybe he had been carrying it all along. Later that night, Laura sat cross-legged on the floor beside him, the house bathed in a soft amber glow. "You'd be good at it," she whispered, stroking his side. "You don't try too hard. You just show up, and sometimes that's everything." Miles let out a slow exhale and rested his chin on her knee. Laura closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet, "Let's see what happens." And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was saving him. She felt like they were about to build something together. The first visit was on a rainy Thursday. The sky hung low and gray over the Children's Trauma Recovery Center, and Laura's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she pulled into the parking lot. It wasn't fear, not quite, but a weight, something pressing into her chest, making her wonder if this had been the right decision, if Miles was ready, if she was... She glanced into the back seat. Miles sat in his usual quiet posture, back legs tucked beneath him, shoulders relaxed but alert. The blue glove rested beside him on the seat, like it always did, his only possession from a past no one could quite explain. Laura had thought about leaving it at home. Part of her wanted him to let it go on his own. But when she tried to leave without it, Miles stood by the door, staring at the spot where it sat, unmoving. So she brought it. Inside, the center was warm and calm. The staff greeted them with quiet nods and soft voices. No loud introductions, no cheering, just space, just care. The children sat in a circle on soft floor mats, their bodies small and guarded. They were different ages, some as young as 5, others in their early teens, but they all carried the same kind of silence, the kind that clung like fog, heavy and hard to breathe through. Laura knelt beside Miles, gave him a quick scratch behind the ear, and whispered, "It's okay. Just be who you are." She let the leash slip loose and stepped back. Miles didn't rush. He didn't scan the room for the most excited face or the first reaching hand. He walked slowly, carefully, like each step was a question. "Do you need me? Is it safe to come closer?" Most of the kids watched him from beneath heavy eyelids. A few looked away, but one boy didn't move at all. He sat near the far wall, arms crossed tightly over his chest, hood pulled low over his face. His hair was black and uncombed, and his body language screamed, "Do not come near me." No one had been able to reach him, not the therapists, not the volunteers. He hadn't spoken in 2 weeks, but that was exactly where Miles went, straight toward the boy. No hesitation, no noise. He stopped just a foot away, sat down, and looked up at him. Nothing happened for a long moment. Laura's breath caught. Then, with the gentlest motion, Miles nudged the blue glove forward. He didn't paw at it, didn't drop it casually. He placed it deliberately at the boy's feet. The room froze. The boy's head twitched slightly, like he wasn't sure what he'd seen. Then he looked down, eyes narrowing, his fingers unclenched. Slowly, he reached forward, picked up the glove, and turned it over in his hands. His eyes, still hidden beneath his hood, began to glisten. And then he whispered so softly it barely reached Laura's ears, "My brother had one just like this." Miles didn't move. He didn't lean in, didn't nuzzle. He just waited. The boy looked at him, really looked. And in that moment, just for a second, his entire body relaxed. He nodded. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't dramatic, but it was everything. Laura felt something break open in her chest. Not in a painful way, but in a way that made room for something else. For understanding, for awe. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. She simply watched as Miles curled up beside the boy, resting his head on the boy's foot. No one spoke. No one needed to. Later that evening, when Laura and Miles returned home, The house felt different, still familiar, still theirs, but quieter, fuller somehow, like it had absorbed the weight of what had happened. Miles walked in, and, instead of heading to his usual corner by the front door, he stopped. Laura looked down. His glove wasn't with him. She froze, checked the car, the crate, the blanket by the door, nothing. She turned back to Miles, heart pounding. "Where's your glove?" He blinked at her, then lay down in the middle of the room. And that was it. Laura sat beside him slowly, realizing the truth as it washed over her. He had left it. He had chosen to leave it. She remembered the way he had carried it everywhere, from that first night in the shopping cart of a broken world to every quiet corner of her house. It had been his only constant, his only proof that someone, somewhere, had once held him, and now he had given it away. Laura brushed her hand along his back, whispering, "You gave it to him, didn't you?" Miles didn't respond. He didn't need to. She closed her eyes and pictured the boy sitting there still, the glove cradled in his small hands, a bridge between two souls, who understood something no adult could explain. "You don't need it anymore," she whispered, "because now you're the comfort." And with that, she realized something else. This wasn't just a visit. It was a goodbye, not to the past, not to the pain, but to the idea that he had to carry it alone. Miles had laid down his burden so someone else could begin healing theirs. And he had done it without a sound. Miles never carried the glove again. From the day he placed it at the feet of the quiet boy in the trauma center, it was gone not just physically, but symbolically. He didn't need it anymore. He had become what it represented. After that visit, the invitations came slowly at first, then steadily. Gwen passed the word on to other colleagues, therapists, school counselors, social workers, people who worked in spaces where silence was the loudest sound, where the smallest gestures meant the world. They didn't want just any therapy dog. They wanted Miles. He never performed tricks. He never barked on command or rolled over or brought things back. He didn't need to. He simply walked in, sat down, and listened with his body. Some dogs bring joy by being goofy and loud. Miles brought peace by simply being there. He visited children's hospitals, sitting beside beds of kids too weak to speak, too tired to play. He visited shelters for domestic abuse survivors, curling up next to women whose hands trembled even when they were alone. He visited memory care homes, where the elderly would stroke his fur and call him names from decades past: Buddy, Max, Honey, as though reaching for pieces of love they thought had slipped away forever. Wherever Miles went, he left something behind, not a sound, not a toy, but a quiet reassurance that someone still knew how to stay. Laura always stayed nearby. She didn't interfere, didn't direct. She let Miles lead, learning to trust his timing, his instincts. Sometimes he would walk straight to someone within seconds. Other times, he'd simply lie down in the center of a room and wait. It was never rushed. It was never forced. She'd watch as children slowly inched closer, some on hands and knees, some with tears they didn't understand. Adults, two nurses, therapists would sometimes find themselves crouching beside him without quite knowing why. And Miles? He never demanded affection. He never asked for praise. He just gave quietly, again and again. Laura often found herself thinking back to that first night, the cold, the silence, the weight of that tiny blue glove. She'd thought she was rescuing a dog, that she was the one offering safety, comfort, a second chance. But she had been wrong. "I used to think I saved him," she said, once during a radio interview for a local outreach program. "But really, I think he saved me first." She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. People understood. One late afternoon, nearly a year after she first found him, Laura and Miles visited a community park near the edge of town. It wasn't part of their schedule. No hospitals, no centers, just a quiet day off, the kind where the sun hung low and golden in the sky, and the world seemed to move a little slower. They walked past the benches and the swings, through the scattered laughter of children and the gentle hum of conversations, nobody paid them much mind. It was just a woman and her dog, taking a stroll like any other, but Laura's eyes were drawn to the far end of the park where the trees thinned out, and the remnants of the old train station still stood, or rather, had stood. The structure had been demolished months ago. All that remained was the outline of its foundation, faint and cracked, like a footprint left in time. Weeds had grown over the edges, and wildflowers had found room to bloom. Laura stopped walking. Miles did too. She looked out across the empty patch of earth, remembering the way it had once felt heavy, forgotten, haunted by waiting. Now it was quiet in a different way, peaceful. She sat on the grass, and Miles lay beside her, his head resting near her knee, his breathing slow and steady. Ahead of them, kids laughed and chased each other with chalk-covered hands. Behind them, a space once heavy with loneliness had become something else soft. Miles blinked slowly, his eyes tracking a child running past with a blue kite. Laura smiled. "You don't need that glove anymore," she whispered, brushing a hand through his fur. "You've become what it meant." Miles didn't move, but he leaned into her touch. She looked down at him and thought of all the places they'd been, all the people they'd met, all the lives they'd entered without ever asking permission, and how gently they'd done it. Every visit was a step, and with every step, Miles had left a part of his heart behind, but not in sorrow, in gift, in presence, in trust. As the sun dipped lower, casting warm golden light across the field, Laura watched as Miles finally closed his eyes. He didn't curl tightly like he used to. He stretched out, belly to the earth, chest rising and falling in rhythm with the breeze. This was home now, not a place, not a room, but this moment, this breath, this being known. Laura looked at the children playing nearby. One of them, a little girl with braids and freckles, was tying a blue ribbon to the end of a stick, letting it flutter like a flag, and suddenly, she thought of the glove again, not as a loss, but as a message, a reminder that when you hold on to hope long enough, love will find its way back to you. And sometimes, it has four legs. Sometimes, healing doesn't come with noise or applause. Sometimes, it walks quietly on four legs and chooses to stay. If this story moved you, even just a little, consider subscribing to Veil Marks. Every subscriber brings us one step closer to our first 1,000 a dream that fuels every word, every edit, every heartfelt moment we share. As the saying goes, not all heroes wear capes. Some simply wait in silence, holding a glove. Let us know in the comments what this story meant to you, because your words are the echoes that guide us forward. This is more than just a video, it's a meaningful message, and we're honored to share it with you. Until next time, stay kind.